Have you ever been touched without being touched? I know that sounds strange, but let me explain. It wasn't a kiss, not even a hug, just a quiet moment, a hand brushing mine in the kitchen, voice saying, "You look good in blue," and for the first time in years, I felt like a woman again, not a mother, not a wife, not a housekeeper running on coffee and habit. Just me. Happened so quickly, too quick to be wrong, too small to be real. But my body remembered it, the way your fingers remember the warmth of a fire long after it's out. He wasn't my husband. He was the Nanny, younger, quieter, and more present than anyone had been in years. We never crossed the line, not with our lips, but maybe with our hearts, maybe with our eyes, maybe with the ache of wanting to be seen just one more time. If you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, if you've ever sat beside someone who used to look at you like you were the only one in the room, and now barely looks up from their phone, then you'll understand this story. Because it's not about betrayal, it's about awakening and the quiet moments that change us, not by what happens, but by what almost does. So stay with me. This is the kind of story we carry in silence, the kind that lives in glances, not words. And maybe, just maybe, you've lived it too. I used to think the silence in a marriage came slowly, like fog rolling in on a quiet morning, soft and harmless. But in truth, it arrives with a single sound. A chair pulled back without a word, a coffee cup placed on the counter without looking up, a good night said out of habit, not love. Mark and I had been together nearly 15 years. We had a rhythm, not a bad one, just empty. He traveled often for work, Alaska mostly, weeks at a time. He'd leave with a kiss on the cheek and come home with stories I'd already heard. I didn't resent him. I didn't miss him in a romantic way. I missed myself because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a woman and started feeling like a utility. I was the scheduler, the picker-upper, the meal planner, the human reminder alarm. My children loved me, but they didn't really see me. Mark relied on me, but he didn't really ask about me. And when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized who I'd become. I didn't wear perfume anymore, didn't brush my hair before bed, didn't wear anything but cotton and compromise. I was functioning, but not feeling. And that's when it started. Not with George's hands, not even his eyes, but with his presence. He didn't ask for anything, didn't compliment me in ways that crossed the line. But when he stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables into stars for Lily, I noticed how quiet my body had been until then. There was something about the way he moved, deliberate, calm, like nothing needed to be rushed. And in contrast, I realized how long I had been rushing. Through mornings, through weeks, through years. You see, emotional distance rarely feels loud. It feels like brushing your teeth next to someone who no longer glances up. Like folding socks while your partner scrolls through sports scores. Like hearing, "I love you" without warmth. That's how women disappear in plain sight. We stop asking to be held. We stop initiating touch. We stop wondering why we no longer want to be wanted. And worst of all, we convince ourselves this is normal, that fading desire is just part of growing older, that dry skin, quiet bedrooms, and emotional numbness are just biology. But what if that's not true? What if it isn't your age? What if it's not your hormones? What if the real reason you feel distant isn't because something is wrong with you, but because no one has looked at you like you matter in years? No one tells older women this, that the body listens to attention, that desire begins with being seen, not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman with blood still moving, a heart still longing, a self still aching to be remembered. And all it takes sometimes is one glance too long, one sentence too soft, one moment where someone finally makes you feel real again. That's when the silence cracks. Not loudly, but enough for something to slip through. Something dangerous, or maybe something necessary. His name was Jordan. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. Our usual sitter canceled, and Beth, my neighbor, had handed me his card 2 weeks earlier. He's great with kids, she said, and honestly, he just makes the house feel calmer. I didn't believe her. But when Jordan showed up at the door, something in me paused. I had expected someone older, maybe softer, a man with a warm smile and white hair. Instead, there he stood, in tall, solid, brown skin glowing in the afternoon sun, shoulders squared, not from arrogance, but assurance. He wasn't handsome in the obvious way, but there was something in the way he looked directly at you, not through you, not past you, at you. I opened the door in sweatpants, hair in a half-done bun, shirt still stained from toddler hands. And he smiled, not the flirty kind, the kind that disarms you, that says you're safe. And the kids loved him immediately. Lily, my youngest, wrapped herself around his leg like she'd known him forever. Tyler brought out his plastic dinosaur collection without a second thought. And me, I just stood there, watching, trying to remember when someone last made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I hired him out of desperation, but also out of something I wasn't ready to name. Over the weeks that followed, Jordan became part of the rhythm of our home. He didn't scroll his phone. He didn't count minutes until he left. He sang while folding laundry. He built Lego castles with both kids, carefully, without rushing. And in between the chaos of parenting, I started listening for his voice in the hallway, waiting for those 3-second chats we shared while packing school lunches. Nothing was ever inappropriate. Nothing was said. Nothing was done. But that didn't mean nothing was happening. It began with the smallest details. The way he said, "Good morning, Miss Emily," with that little teasing lilt. The way he noticed when I wore something new, not with compliments, but with presence. And then, the morning everything shifted. I was late. Wet hair. Blouse wrinkled, half-tucked. Zoom call blinking on the laptop screen. He was in the kitchen pouring cereal with Tyler. "Rough morning?" he asked, glancing up with that calm, knowing look. "You have no idea," I sighed, grabbing my mug. But he said it. "You look good in blue." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said it. Look, it was fact, not flirtation. It was a performance. Just a quiet truth that slipped out of him before he could stop it. I froze. Not because I was shocked, but because I hadn't heard that tone in so long. I had forgotten how much I missed it. My pulse quickened. I laughed it off, pretended not to hear. But that afternoon, while folding clothes in the laundry room, he walked in holding a basket of towels. "Need help?" I didn't look up. "I'm good," I said. But as he stepped past me, his hand brushed my lower back. Just lightly. Barely there, but enough to stop time. We didn't speak. He didn't apologize. I didn't move. The silence between us heavy, like a held breath, like a wave about to break. And then he walked out. No words. No glance back. I stared at a single sock in my hand, like it held answers. My heart pounding, not from guilt, but from recognition. That night I lay beside Mark, his body warm, his breathing steady, his back turned. And all I could think about was a man who didn't mean to touch me, but did, and the part of me that didn't want to forget it. You might be wondering, how can a glance, a moment, a soft brush of a hand change so much inside a person? The answer is not just emotional, it's biological. Our bodies are not separate from our stories. They are shaped by them. When Jordan touched my lower back, it wasn't passion that woke up. It was blood. Literally. You see, after a certain age, especially for women, blood flow to intimate areas quietly starts to decline. It doesn't vanish all at once. It fades, like a forgotten song in the background. The result? Less sensation, less warmth, less interest. Not because you don't love your partner, but because your body isn't receiving the signals it used to. And what sends those signals? Circulation, hormones, nervous system patterns. Let's break it down simply. Imagine your intimacy like a garden hose. In your 20s and 30s, water flows easily. The hose is soft, responsive. But over time, if it's unused, left in the sun, bent, or neglected, it stiffens. The flow weakens. No matter how much you turn the faucet, the water doesn't get through. That's what happens to the tiny blood vessels, especially those around the pelvis, the lower abdomen, the skin of your thighs, your chest, and your hands. They don't just carry blood, they carry feeling. And when those vessels aren't being stimulated by touch, by connection, by even the presence of attention, they shrink, they tighten, they shut down. That's why so many older women say, I just don't feel anything anymore. Not because they've lost desire, but because the body no longer believes intimacy is needed. And here's the twist. When someone sees you again, when someone touches you with kindness, when someone makes your name feel personal again, your brain responds. It sends a signal through the vagus nerve, a long winding cord that connects the heart, the gut, and the pelvis. That nerve controls more than you think. It tells your body whether to be in defense or in trust. And when it switches to trust mode, that's when oxytocin rises. That's when nitric oxide opens your blood vessels. That's when your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, and your skin softens. That's when your body starts to say, I want to feel again. This isn't magic. It's chemistry. Even the lightest non-sexual touch can reactivate sensory pathways that were asleep for years. And with consistent emotional safety, those pathways strengthen. Circulation improves. Sensation returns. Lubrication increases. Even estrogen activity may rise slightly in women over 50 when oxytocin levels increase, especially in emotionally intimate situations. So when I say Jordan changed something in me, it wasn't lust. It was vascular awakening. The kind of change that doesn't begin in the bedroom, but in the brain, in the breath, in the nervous system. What most women need at this age isn't a hormone shot or a prescription. They need to be seen, and without expectation, because the female body is not a machine that breaks down. It's a garden that stops blooming when the sun disappears. And what brought the light back? It wasn't sex. It was being reminded that I was still alive, that my body still remembered how to respond. It just needed someone to speak the right language. And sometimes that language is nothing more than a hand resting for a second too long and a whisper that says, "You still matter." After that day in the laundry room, something inside me didn't go back to sleep. Not completely. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't change my life overnight, but I did begin to change my attention. The smallest things began to matter again. The scent of lotion, the way the sunlight fell across my collarbone, the softness of my fingertips after a hot shower. I had forgotten how much intimacy begins before any touch, how it begins in how you treat yourself. So I started with my mornings. I gave myself 5 minutes. Before the kids, before the dishes, before the emails and the lunches and the laundry, just 5 minutes to breathe, to sit with a cup of tea, to put my hand on my chest and whisper something I hadn't said in years. "You're still here." And my body responded, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a slow blooming, like warmth rising through fingertips that had been cold for far too long. Then I changed what I wore, not for anyone else, for me. I pulled out the red blouse I hadn't touched in 3 years. It didn't fit like before, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw a version of myself I had missed. Not younger, but thinner, just awake. I started moving differently, slower, more aware of my hips, my waist, my thighs, not to see deuce, but to feel. That's when the sensations returned. And here's what surprised me most. My relationship with Mark began to shift. Not because he changed, but because I stopped waiting. I stopped waiting for him to look up from his phone. Stopped hoping he'd notice I bought new lotion. Stopped depending on his attention to validate my existence. I gave that to myself. And that self-respect, that embodied presence, it became magnetic. I didn't need him to chase me. I simply started walking through the house like a woman who still had fire in her blood. And one night, weeks after that afternoon with Jordan, Mark looked at me and said, "You smell different tonight." It wasn't about the perfume. It was about the way I wore my own skin. From that moment on, I started practicing 3 simple things. Not routines, not checklists, but rituals. Moments that told my body, "You are still a woman." Each ritual had a rhythm, and each one changed me. The first was touch, not his. I began touching my own body with kindness, moisturizing with slow strokes, massaging my temples before bed, holding my belly with affection instead of judgment. At first it felt foreign, indulgent, even foolish, but soon my nervous system began to trust me again. The second was breath. I had no idea how long I'd been holding my breath through life, waiting, bracing, enduring. Now, each morning I took 10 slow breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth, and I visualized warmth spreading through my pelvis. Not arousal, just presence, just being in my own body. And the third, expression. I let my desires rise again. Not always for sex, sometimes just for closeness, to be held, to laugh, to lie in silence without obligation. And I began asking for what I needed, not with shame, but with grace. I told Mark gently, "Can we lie face to face tonight, just for a while?" And he nodded. And for the first time in years, I felt our knees touch under the blanket, and I didn't pull away. Because I had already returned to myself. There's a myth that older women don't want intimacy, that we fade, that desires for the young. But the truth is, desire never leaves. It waits. It waits for safety. It waits for present. It waits for us to believe we're worthy of it again. And that's what I chose to rebuild. Not just with Mark. Up with me. I rebuilt the bridge to myself. And it changed everything. I felt more aroused without trying. Softer during conversation. Less reactive. More patient. My skin changed. My sleep deepened. Even my digestion improved. Because when a woman reclaims her sensuality not as performance, but as presence, her entire biology shifts. It's not theory. It's chemistry. It's circulation. It's oxytocin. It's the warmth that returns when blood finds its way home again. Some nights we still go to bed back to back, but now I don't resent it because I know how to turn toward him when I want to. I know how to open the blanket, close the distance, and say without a word, I'm still here. And he responds, sometimes not perfectly, but genuinely. He began making tea again, offered back rubs without being asked questions he hadn't asked in years. What do you dream about lately? What made you laugh today? And just like that, our relationship started breathing again. Not because we found magic, but because we made space for warmth. So if you're reading this and you're wondering where to begin, don't wait for someone else to awaken you. Start with 5 minutes. Start with lotion. Start with looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I am not finished. Let your body hear it. Let your skin remember. Let your breath carry it. You are still here. And that is where every spark begins. I know what some of you might be thinking right now. This is beautiful, but it's too late for me. I'm in my 60s, my 70s. Who's going to touch me now? Even if I tried, my body wouldn't respond. Isn't it selfish to want more at this age? I've heard those whispers. I used to say them too. One night I remember sitting at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to sleep. The dishes were done. The lights dimmed. The quiet was heavy. And I remember whispering to myself, I think that part of me is just gone. But here's what I learned. Desire doesn't vanish. It waits. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And if we stop listening, if we tell ourselves this is just how aging is, then we slowly begin to die in places no one can see. That's the real danger. Not aging, but agreeing with it. Not the wrinkles on our skin, but the silence we accept in our hearts. I once met a woman at a community event. She was 79. Sharp mind, soft voice. She leaned in and told me, I haven't been held in 12 years. Then she smiled and said, but I just bought red nail polish again. I don't know why. I just wanted to see it on my hands. That's not vanity. That's a heartbeat. That's life knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. And here's the truth no one tells older women. You're not asking for too much. You're asking to feel real again. And you deserve that, even if your hips ache, even if your body's changed, even if you've been through grief or distance or decades of numbness. You still belong in a body that feels. You still deserve to wake up and want something. Not for anyone else, but for you. So no, it's not too late. It's only too late when you stop choosing to come home to yourself. I don't know where you are right now, Maybe you're sitting alone at the edge of your bed, wondering if anyone still sees the woman behind your daily chores. Maybe you're folding laundry like I was, or looking in the mirror at a face that no longer matches how young your heart still feels. Well, let me tell you this. You are not gone. You are not invisible. You are not too late. If anything, this moment, right now, could be your return, not to who you were, but to who you still are. A woman with warmth in her hands. A woman with a story still unfolding. A woman whose touch, whose voice, whose presence still matters. Not because someone else tells you so, but because you choose to believe it again. Tonight, after this video ends, I invite you to do something small. Light a candle. Place your hand over your chest. Say your own name out loud. And whisper, "I'm still here." Let your body hear it. Let your breath carry it. Let it be the first note in a new melody of connection. Because healing doesn't always begin with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with one soft hand on your belly, one moment of honesty in the dark, one deep breath before sleep. And if this story touched something in you, something tender, something real, tell me. You don't have to write much, just a number. Type 1 if you've ever felt invisible but want to feel alive again. Type 0 if you're not sure yet but you're willing to try. Either way, I will read it. Every single one. And if you know another woman who needs this reminder, send this to her, not as advice, but as a quiet knock on the door of her soul. A reminder too, she's still here.